Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Haig. I'm Executive Director of CARL, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, and a SCOSS Board member. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar, Investments in Open Services via the Global Sustainability Coalition for Open Science Services, SCOSS. I would like to start by acknowledging that CARL is based in Canada's capital, Ottawa, which is on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Ottawa sits at the confluence of 3 rivers and was occupied for about 8,000 years prior to European arrival. The name Ottawa itself is derived from the Algonquin word adawe, meaning to trade. I invite you all to reflect on the origins of the land where you are situated and on our collective role in honoring and respecting this land and its peoples. Today's webinar is co-presented by CARL, the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, the Canadian Research Knowledge Network, CRKN, and the Association of Research Libraries, ARL. Please note the participants have been muted upon entry. You may use the chat feature to bring technical difficulties to our attention or to share comments and resources. Please use the Q&A feature to submit questions. You can also upvote the questions there if you like. I wish to note that simultaneous interpretation in French is available for today's presentation. If you would like to continue listening in English, just leave your settings as they are. Pour des francophones qui assistent à cette séance, veuillez noter que l'interprétation simultanée est disponible. Sélectionnez le français en utilisant votre menu au bas de l'écran. CARL is committed to providing a welcoming, safe, and harassment-free environment for everybody on this call. We therefore ask you to read and comply with the CARL Code of Conduct, which has been posted in the chat. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available via the CARL YouTube account after the session. Slides have been posted in French and English on the CARL website. Links to these have also been posted in the chat. I'd now like to invite Judy Ruttenberg, Senior Director, Scholarship and Policy at ARL and SCOSS Board member, to introduce today's speakers. Judy?
Thank you, Susan. I'm very pleased that ARL was able to collaborate with CARL and CRKN to bring this joint webinar to Canada and US institutions. SCOSS has made an important contribution to the challenging work of harnessing collective investments towards supporting the global open science and open scholarship infrastructure. Our main speaker today is Martin Borchert, Chair of the SCOSS Board and University Librarian at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, where he was appointed to the position in June 2016. So thank you, Martin, for being with us. It's tomorrow morning in Sydney, so perhaps you know the outcome of our elections. We also have with us today Vanessa Proudman, Director of Spark Europe, the organization responsible for launching SCOSS. Vanessa is chair of the executive committee of SCOSS and has joined us today in case there are questions she can help answer as well. We also have on the call Craig Olsevik, the Senior Manager of Licensing from the National Consortium, Canadian Research Knowledge Network, CRKN. Craig has been leading the efforts of managing and collecting SCOSS pledges from the Canadian institutions over the past 2 funding cycles. Craig will also be available to answer questions regarding the Canadian consortial approach during the Q&A. Finally, as SCOSS Board members, Susan and I would also be happy to take questions at the end of the webinar. As we will have a question period at the end, you're encouraged to type your questions at any time using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions can be asked in French or English. Now over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Judy. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a wonderful opportunity to be with you this afternoon to discuss SCOSS. I'd like to thank you, Judy, and also I'd like to thank you, Susan, the ARL and CARL for having me. I'll speak to you today. I'm going to talk through the slide deck that we have for you. So first of all, I'd just like to discuss with you the case for SCOSS. We're all very used to, of course, working in libraries, working with commercial publishers and paying fees to access content and also services. But perhaps we don't think enough about the open access resources and who pays for those, because really they can't be free for everybody. And when you think about it, there always is someone who has to pay. The open services still need to pay for people to run their services. They have all the development costs, they have infrastructure costs, they have content costs in some cases as well. And so who pays for these? Without having sustainability, I think many of these services are at risk. They're often at risk because they were created using project funding, which had a starting point and an end point. But who pays for those services once the project is completed? There are risks in the services reaching a stagnation point. There could be a downsizing, or they could move into the commercial sector and ask for payment. So the aim of SCOSS was to help with the sustainability for the open access infrastructure that we've all really become used to using now, and to help ensure that they will continue into the future. Especially in this year, 2020, we've seen the importance of open science, open infrastructure. And so this really is a good case in point for why now is the right time to support SCOSS and the infrastructure that we recommend. I'm sure you've all seen the nail and paper, which looks at the principles for the principles of open infrastructure. We always think about this in mind, and in SCOSS, we support infrastructure with these principles, which are around governance, also having capacity, and also having the insurance mechanisms to improve the sustainability of these resources. So what's SCOSS? I'll just give you a summary. It's an initiative led by SPARC Europe. It also is a community-led and governed initiative. It was joined by CARL and ARL a few years ago in 2018. And it's there to assess the open science infrastructure that's available and advocate for crowdfunding to sustain open science. It's not a subscription service, it's not a payment service, it doesn't take any of the money, which we channel through crowdfunding. We've had SCOSS working for a few years now. It started around 3 or 4 years ago with a broad range of groups who joined together to invent the idea for SCOSS, working with SPARC Europe. It is global. There's representative here from most of the continents on the globe as well. It's including a call, which I'm a member of. It's including like the CARL. There's also European University Association. There was like the Science Europe, the European Research Council, SPARC was involved, IFLA, SPARC Europe. There's also IFL and the Australasian Open Access Strategy Group as well. So this was the group which formed SCOSS in the beginning. Over time, we have developed the governance structure, which I think now is very sound. It reports to the board of SPARC Europe, which is the lead agency. Also, SCOSS has a board, which I'll show you the members for. There's an executive group and advisory group. And then we work with infrastructure. And of course, we also work with other funders to some degree as well. I'm the chair of the board currently. I'm into a second term. You've also been introduced to also the director of SPARC, Vanessa Proudman. We also have an advisory group chair who is one of my colleagues at UNS, Fiona Bradley, here in the library at the University of New South Wales. And since we've grown into a membership organisation, which has now been running for a few years, many of those groups you saw before are also member organisations now. But we've also got the Qatar National Library, there's Redelic, There's also like then a CRKN. There's the Association of African Universities, and then there's the ministry in France as well. So there's broad representation. We're always working to increase representation across the globe as well. So these are members of the board for SCOSS. I won't read out all the names, but of course there are a few people here today who are members of the board. So I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of Judy Rutenberg and also like Susan Haig as well on the board. Our board, it meets on a regular basis. We have quite a few meetings a year in which we work on strategy. We work through the funding rounds, the applications. We also do work on engagement as well. So now I'd like to tell you a little bit about how SCOSS works, just using a simple diagram. Through the work of the advisory committee and the board, which are made up of experts, what we do is that we assess applications from open research infrastructure to be supported by SCOSS for funding. Then we announce funding round with the supported infrastructure. And then we liaise with a consortia, and also individual libraries will also consider payment either as a membership or otherwise to make a donation to the supported infrastructure. And then the funding flows directly to the infrastructure. It doesn't flow through SCOSS. It doesn't flow through Spark Europe as well. But we provide advice on how this may happen to some degree. This slide's really important. It's about how SCOSS works to work with open infrastructure to assess them and endorse them for crowdfunding. So first of all, SCOSS does work where we evaluate the priorities. We look at the different kinds also of open infrastructure. We look at the future and the direction. We invite, from open infrastructure, we invite expressions of interest through an application process, which is through the website. We have an application form, which we've improved over the last few years. We then review those and we create then a shortlist. We approach the infrastructure groups which are on the shortlist, and we invite them to submit a full application. We often ask for additional information. We ask for a lot of information. On the right-hand side of that slide, there is the kinds of information we ask for. We ask for information about the general service. We asked about issues around the value, the technical details. We asked about issues that they're having with their ongoing operation and with like the sustainability. We asked a lot of questions about governance models, foresight, what is the best alternative if they don't have SCOSS funding? And ultimately we give them a score because we like to compare. Then through recommendation from the advisory committee that will go to the board, where we discuss in a lot of detail. We have a ranking and a prioritization process. We'll only choose up to 3 infrastructure in each cycle to support. And then we develop a work plan with the infrastructure. We have an agreement between them and also like a Spark Europe. It's a 3-year agreement for a 3-year funding cycle. And we do ask the infrastructure to give a report each year, which is about the progress that they're making in achieving the goals in the work plan. And this is an annual process. So we would do this each year. The first year we called a pilot, which is in its last year of the 3-year cycle. We're now into the middle of the second cycle, and we've been working on the third cycle as well. We have recommendations for crowdfunding, but of course it's up to the individual libraries and the consortia to decide what funding that they might want to contribute for the supported infrastructure. We've got the amounts in euros, but you can convert them to US dollars if you wish. So we only have recommendations. So for large organizations and high income areas of the world, we've got a recommendation. They're like, for 4,000 euros a year for each infrastructure for 3 years. For smaller for smaller organizations, it's half of that, over 2,000 euros. But we also have a consortium discount. So if through a consortium, if you've got a number of universities and it's over 10, or if it's 10 or over, you can get a discount on the contribution, which is quite a good discount as well. But we're flexible. We realise this may, of course, be a tough year budget-wise. I think for libraries, all years can be budget. Can also be tough sometimes as well. So we will gladly accept a smaller contribution. There are many libraries which are giving like 500 euros as well, and of course all amounts are gladly received. We're really working on a model where the contribution amounts are quite small per library, per infrastructure, if you compare them to the commercial prices for the products that we're buying. The goal is to have a broad base of financial support with each library or consortium giving a smaller amount than they might give for most of the commercial services. We also provide a memo which goes to funders, which explains how it works. And there are some cases also like where governments, especially the French, have also provided funds too. So I'd like you to have a think about that and those amounts, and think about how that could fit into your budget. So next, I've just got some numbers to share with you. So the total funds pledged, we're coming close into 3 million euros, which is a bit more than that in US dollars. It's around like $3.5 million. In the total pledging, that's in round 1 and round 2 to date. In the current cycle, round 2, we will hopefully soon be hitting 800,000 euros, which is around $1 million US. So, we have actually achieved a lot in the time that we've been operating, and it's because of the contributions of a broad range of libraries and consortia, and also like the governments. So we're now moving hopefully into 300 institutions soon, I think globally around the world, which are contributing, and a broad range of countries, and 19 countries have contributed to date, which is wonderful. Here's a graph of pledges which are valued by country that you can have a look at. There's quite a broad base of pledging by countries there. We're very appreciative of the US with the contribution that you've made of 14%, and also like the Canadians with 16%. This is a graph of pledging by country. So you can see in this graph that France is first, second is Canada, and the third is the US. But I think this graph also makes you think about the size of a country, the number of people, the number of universities, the number of libraries as well, to give you some idea about relativities as well. So this is percentage of pledges are by country by number of organizations pledging. So you can see here that the US has the largest number of organizations which are already pledging, which is wonderful. But it's a very large country with a lot of universities and a lot of libraries. So thank you very much. And also I go Canada and Australia, Norway, Sweden. So this is a slide that shows which is showing the pledges of infrastructure from US institutions. So the Directory of Open Access Journals has been doing quite well, like with 42. We're also, and it's actually closed, that round has closed for DOAJ, they've reached their funding target. There's also open still is the round like for Sherpa Romeo, but there's only one institution in the US that has pledged for Sherpa Romeo at this time. So I'd like you to have a think about if your library is using Sherpa Romeo, and if you are using the database of license information from publishers in your work, and then to please have a think about if you're able to contribute. There's one pledge for Directory of Open Access Books from the US, which is round 2, so thank you. But there are no pledges from institutions for PKP or for open citations at this time. So please think about, whether you're using the public knowledge program services, whether you're using whether you're using Open Journal system or the Open Conference system. And for open citations, have a think about the future of that. I've got a slide on that in a moment. So I'll just give then an update on each of the rounds of the funding cycle. So round 1, which was the pilot, there were 2 infrastructure that we were supporting, Sherpa Romeo and the Directory of Open Access Journals. The Sherpa Romeo work plan was really around an infrastructure refresh to improve the interface, the user experience. You might see that that's actually changed recently this year. It's about also increasing the content and the licenses and publishers worked with. But we've not really quite reached the target there. We're still under 50% of target for the funding round. So I'd really like to encourage US universities to think about, with this, I'm making a pledge to Sherpa Romeo. It's at the end of the 3rd year, at the end of this year. With Directory of Open Access Journals, it's actually reached its funding target. That's because of contributions from around the world. And I think that's really improved the sustainability of the service. And of course, I want to thank everybody for pledging there. So, and just a reminder that this round is coming to its end at the end of this year. So if you want to pledge for Sherpa Romeo, please do so. Round 2 is the next 3 years, which started this year in 2020. There are 3 infrastructure which SCOSS is supporting in round 2. First one's a joint infrastructure bid. It's from the Directory of Open Access Books and OAPEN. The second one was for Public Knowledge Project, or PKP. And the third one is from Open Citations. And we've been working with the leaders in each of those groups. So I'd like to thank them for working for us. So here's an update on the funding cycle target status. as of a month or two ago. The Doab and Open are just on half of their target, with 55%. PKP is a little bit under a quarter, with like 22%. Open Citations is running at about a fifth, of 20% of funding targets. So there's quite a way to go, but we're still only in year one of a 3-year cycle. So there's plenty of time to pledge to support these initiatives. I'll just tell you a little bit about Doab Open, about their work package. There's a link on the slide there that you can download a flyer about more information. But with the funding that they are seeking and which SCOSS has endorsed, they want to improve their infrastructure and the content engagement. With all of these infrastructure, there's also the sustainability goal to work on too. So they've got a crowdfunding target of just over €500,000. We've received €278,000, remaining target €226,000. So we've just gone over 50% there, with 55%. Now, next one, the infrastructure that we're supporting is Open Citations. Again, there's a link to a flyer for more information. It's a similar development plan infrastructure, but they also want to develop services, engagement and sustainability. This is a product which is being developed as an open source alternative to some of the commercial products in the citation space. I think, it's going to be a really, really good service, and to have that option is very important, I think, globally. Their crowdfunding target is for €1,530,000. And to date, they've received just over €300,000, remaining target of €1,222,000. So there's quite a long way to go still in the funding round, but again, we're only in year one of a 3-year round. So please have a think about the importance of this to your organisation, to the global ecosystem, our libraries around the world, if you're able to fund it. The third one, which we are supporting, is the PKP, or Public Knowledge Project. Again, there's a link. The work package is around a development of software. The engagement, also I think scalability, and as with all the others, of the sustainability. They've got a crowdfunding target of just over €700,000, and received to date, we've got €164,000, remaining target then of €569,000. So there's quite a way to go in achieving the target, but again, we've got a couple of years. So please have a think about whether your organisation is using the services and the systems which are available from PKP, and think about if you're able to make a pledge, please. So this is how US libraries can help. It'd be great if after this presentation, you'll have slides available. If you have a think about it, and if you discuss SCOSS round 2, and also the end of round 1 Sherpa Romeo in your organisation, have a think about and discuss whether you're able to pledge. It could be a membership, or it could be a donation. Is there a consortium that you can walk through which will take the funds and then work with the infrastructure to transfer the funds? And think if you can advocate for 3 years or for 1 year as a pledge. I know that most people on this meeting are at a senior level, but for people otherwise, you of course need to talk with the financial delegate in your organisation. Round 3, we've been working on round 3. We've had the expression of interests issued. We've done shortlisting. We've done also the call for additional information. We have invited a handful of infrastructure to submit a full application. There are 5, and we will be announcing 3 which we will be supporting. We will be making that announcement early next year in 2021, and it'll be a 3-year funding cycle. I did want to make some comments about this year. It's been a very different kind of year, 2020, with what's happened with COVID-19 and the pandemic. I think the year has shown how much we're using open resources in which are supporting research and teaching and learning in particular. And, it makes you think about the importance of, I think, of paying a small amount as a donation or a membership to support the open infrastructure for the resources that we're already using. There's been a big impact on budgets, I think, to universities in many parts of the world. So, and of course that rolls down and impacts library budgets as well, which means you may have a reduced funding for your scholarly information resources, but please think about the benefits of supporting open infrastructure at this time to improve the sustainability, because they still need funding at this time. Remember that you can consider a pledge down to €500. I'll just give you some comments about the evolution of SCOSS, because we've been going now for 3 or 4 years. These are sort of a list of issues, I think, or challenges that we've been facing in the board. So we've been working hard to assemble a global membership and representation. We still don't have all parts of the world which are board memberships, but we're working on that. We've put a lot of work into the expression of interest in the assessment program, and we've developed that over the years. We've also been working hard to also develop a taxonomy for open science infrastructure. And we're very eager to work with a diversity over the world, including different resources, nations, languages, and different kinds of resources to be inclusive as much as possible. We've been working hard on building critical mass of institutions which are donating, and to develop also a business model which is easily scalable. I did want to also just mention that, in the commercial world, we're used to working with so many different groups, organizations and publishers. And I think it's okay that there are multiple groups in the open space as well, of course. So, we have a close relationship with Invest in Open Infrastructure, with one of our board members on both of those groups. And I think we can work together very well. In many ways, what we're doing in SCOSS is complementary, I think, to Invest in Open Infrastructure. So now I think our challenges are in this year with 2020 and budget impacts to keep the momentum going, and to help to sustain the infrastructure going forwards. This is a slide just to bring your attention to the website for SCOSS. We've put a lot of effort into the website. There's a lot of information there for you to look at later. And this is just the last slide for further information, who you can contact Susan, or you can talk to Judy, and you can talk to Craig as well. And you also have my email address. I can provide that too. Happy to answer any questions for anybody. So that's the end of the slides. We've got quite a bit of time for Q&A now. So I'll hand over to Judy and to Susan, who are going to be facilitating the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Martin. So yeah, I encourage folks to put questions into the Q&A. I also have a question for really for participants, if they're willing to answer, which is, sort of upon hearing this presentation, does the not-for-profit status and independence of an infrastructure influence your decision to fund it? And sort of related, how well do various parts of your university understand the importance of infrastructure and supporting open scholarship? What do those conversations look like in your institutions, and how might SCOSS sort of figure into those? So if any participants are willing to answer that question, that would be interesting. And of course, we welcome your questions to Martin or to Vanessa.
So I think those are excellent questions. The not-for-profit status, that's a requirement, which is in the assessment process. We ask for that, and we ask for evidence as well. So the infrastructure which SCOSS is going to put forward, which are for crowdfunding, they will need to be not-for-profit. They can have different names and terms in different parts of the world, so we explore that a little bit as necessary as well. Yeah. And then the second part was about infrastructure. We do have a range of experts on our panels who have got we've got a broad range of knowledge around infrastructure. We can call on experts in our organisations. We do ask for a fair bit of information and detail about infrastructure, but at the same time, the infrastructure themselves do need to have their own process for governance and quality, and the choice of infrastructure that they're choosing, whether that be local or whether it be cloud. In most cases, those will be cloud infrastructures, and just using some of the obvious choices for those. Yeah. The other thing I can just add is that in the annual work plan, we do ask for a report on progress and issues. So if there are issues in the project or development cycle for an infrastructure, we hear about them at least on an annual basis, and it can create an opportunity for further investigation or maybe help them with some problem solving. And then Vanessa, would you like to add any comments there? Is there another question? Yeah, okay.
Maybe I'll just ask a little question that maybe some people are thinking about. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about what happens after. So our cycles are more or less, there's more or less 6 infrastructures at a time being promoted. At the end, when they roll off the SCOSS promotional profile, what is expected then? What will happen in terms of funding, and is it become then just a question between the consortium or the institution and the service?
Mm-hmm. Would you like to answer to that one, Vanessa, or I can answer?
Yeah, sure. So, well, firstly, what we really want to stimulate in the application process, we ask the infrastructures to tell us about what the issues are with sustainability, but also what their plans are, even after the SCOSS temporary funding bridge, if you like. So they should also delineate how they're going to explore a more sustainable funding model in the future, and they need to build that into their application to say what they're going to be doing. So the challenge though is, of course, we support infrastructure for 3 years, and to help them raise funds, support each other in managing this. But after that period, we don't follow that up. But we do connect the infrastructures with each other so that they learn from each other about what they're thinking about sustainability. And of course, when they build new relationships with this crowdfunding, so either be it through membership or donations, DOAJ, for example, will use some of those new relationships. We hope that they will continue going forward. They may go forward on a lower level, so lower contributions, but if they see that infrastructure delivering as promised year on year with reports, and they see progress, maybe those relationships will continue. That's what we hope. So we also have a contract between SCOSS and the infrastructure, but we found that with Dutch law, we weren't permitted to impose those kind of restrictions, and we couldn't control what the infrastructure would do in years, to come. Of course, the contract is just for the 3 years. So sorry, it was a bit of a long answer, but I hope that you've got a number of answers to that question, and hopefully that's helpful. Maybe there's something else interesting if you're thinking about, so if you see the value of funding open science infrastructure, and you think, well, how could we do this? Our budgets are limited. I mean, we have a wide, I think it was more than 250 institutions have pledged. Martin has said, you can pledge for 500 euros and upwards. And we're also talking about the cost of an APC. But how is that organized? And if you have limited budgets, they will be more limited this year. We understand that. So some of our funders, so for example, I was listening to a really inspirational one from Belgium this week, where they have a separate, it's called the Fair Open Access Fund. And that funds not-for-profit initiatives. So they are supporting APCs and other OA costs, but they also want to challenge the system and support innovation in the system. So from that fund, they support not-for-profit infrastructure recommended by SCOSS, but also OA journals that are not-for-profit based on PKP and others. So they have strategically decided that not only are they funding through their collection budgets, continuing providing access to your essential material that you've done with the legacy publishers for years now, but also to think ahead and to think about funding not-for-profit, open access, innovative initiatives, so to support that work. So I think that's a really unusual and inspirational case. So that's at one end. But there are many other initiatives. I heard from another colleague from Charleston today, also saying that they were also working with sponsors or foundations that are providing, I'm looking for the right US word for this, sorry, I'm donors, providing donations to your university, that they can actually get funds for OA from that, but they can't get it from other budgets. So it's, there are a range of different means of how to fund infrastructure. I know this is kind of changing a mindset and thinking about, well, how, under which budget post could you draw this from? I think it would be really interesting to hear what some of you on the call are already doing and how you are funding innovation in open access in these difficult times. That would be really interesting for us to hear more about that, to see what opportunities there are also to share with your colleagues, perhaps.
So while we wait for raised hands on that one, Vanessa or Martin, I wonder if in the funding for, in the pledges that you've collected, that SCOSS has collected for these infrastructures, to what extent are they coming from the libraries, or have you seen other contributions from across the university, either from academic departments, and sort of the balance of responsibility, whether these are library funded initiatives, they're sort of core scholarly infrastructure in lots of ways. Are we seeing those contributions as well?
So we have one funder so far who has contributed, who was one of the first funders, the German Research Council. But largely, we have also been campaigning and reaching out to libraries because they're so dependent on some of this infrastructure. However, we don't know about the conversations about where those libraries are sourcing their funding from, whether it comes from the library budget or whether it comes from other budgets where the university administration is pulling their weight as well. We really think it's important that it is a collaborative effort and that one has those conversations about funding open with university administration, senior management, because of course it's in their interest to get more visibility to their research. So we're not aware currently of much going on in this space outside of libraries, but we certainly think that it's a responsibility for a number of stakeholders to contribute. Those who are using this infrastructure, be it other service providers, research management, libraries.
Most of the donating organisations are libraries of universities. There's also a donation from the French government, which is a very large donation, which was really, really great.
Yes, maybe I should say something. So the biggest funder is, you've noticed, is France, and most of that comes from one donation, which is more than $500,000 US. And you think, well, how come? So a couple of years ago, they launched their national open science policy, and with that came a fund, and a lot of that fund draws on savings from big deals with Elsevier and other publishers. So what they have done is that they are repurposing, they are looking at their collection budgets and investing in, as I say, not-for-profit, innovative infrastructure, services, journals that are developed in France. And they are also looking outside of France because, of course, they're also they're dependent on some of that infrastructure. And furthermore, even if they're not directly using a particular infrastructure, they feel that because it's a global issue and challenge and they have the funds, they are also contributing to infrastructure. So they are really a very model case of how we would like this to look in future, that every country has a fund or that every institution has a fund and that they're paying forward to fund innovation in scholarly communication. So if you'd like to hear more about that, I can certainly put you in touch with them. They also have a very rigorous selection process about what they fund, although for the international infrastructure they fund, they come to SCOSS, and they know how we evaluate, and they have confidence in that. So that saves them some time when they want to fund something.
I mean, I think that model where there's there's an expressed need, there's clearly a need, it's well managed, it's monitored, it's a curated set of infrastructures that are eventually promoted. It's a very good model for the international, and over time, the services that are being funded are gaining strength and getting more of a foothold around the world and having more of a global impact. But also there's very familiar services coming forward. So I think it's a nice model of a way of gradually hiving off a very modest investment in international global infrastructure that benefits everybody. It may benefit the country, it may benefit locally, but it may also benefit the whole ecosystem. I mean, Canada, for its way of thinking about it, it's now at this point about 3.5%, I think, of the contribution, and that national consortial approach works well. But it doesn't have to be a national consortial approach. It can be much more for the regional consortia can work equally as well. We actually there were some individual contributions before, and some contributions from OCL, which is a regional consortium, and we've sort of just harnessed that and expanded it. And I think the more that contribute, the less it is for everybody, really, or at least the faster the targets are met, and the more needy infrastructures that can be served. So it's I hope it'll get more uptake.
I think that's a really great point, Susan. We, you know, one of the things that we hear repeatedly about crowdfunding or about trying to, you know, sustain these kinds of good works is sort of how people can know where their investments are well spent. And I think what SCOSS contributes is this, you know, truly international group of experts that vet these projects, and also for SCOSS to work with them to sort of achieve the sustainability that we're looking for. It's sort of a nice model on both ends.
I'd like to add there that it's okay to think about, you know, which infrastructure that you're able to or want to fund, and and which you can't. If you can't make a 3-year pledge, then just make a 1-year pledge. And if you can't pledge the 4,000 or 2,000 euros, but you can do the 500 euros and only for 1 year, then that's great too. So we're happy to work with you with whatever you can pledge.
Okay, well, last call for questions. I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A now. Anything else from our panelists? Parting thoughts? Well, in that case, on behalf of ARL, Carl, and CRKN, I would really like to thank everyone for attending this webinar. And I'd particularly like to thank Martin for taking the time to walk us through this detailed look at SCOSS and giving us a lot to have a think about.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time today.